The year is 1178. A teenage boy is alone on a mountain called Birken Kaldon. His father was murdered when he was 9. His tribe abandoned him shortly after, because a boy with no army is not an asset. He is a liability. For 9 days, he survives on roots and field mice. By every measurable standard of his time, his story is already over, but he is not panicking. He is not plotting revenge the way rage produces revenge. Blind, reactive, self-destructive. He is thinking, clearly, deliberately, without distortion. That mountain does not break him. It builds him. And what it builds becomes the architecture of the largest empire in human history. His name will be Genghis Khan. Now, before we go further, I need to address something directly. You already know this man was responsible for extraordinary violence. This video will not argue otherwise. But here is what almost everyone misses. Brutality was never his competitive advantage. The steppe in the 12th century was full of brutal men, brutal warlords, brutal tribes, brutal systems of warfare that had been running for centuries before he was born. If raw brutality were the deciding variable, 100 men before him would have built what he built. None of them did. What separated Genghis Khan from every competitor on that steppe was not how hard he could hit. It was how he thought. The mental architecture he built alone, without teachers, without philosophy, and which historians 8 centuries later are still mapping. Marcus Aurelius was writing in a military tent at the Danube around 170 AD. Private notes to himself about how to think, decide, and build something that lasts. Those notes became the Meditations. Epictetus, born a slave in Greece a century earlier, arrived through pure discipline of thought at a framework his students carried across the entire Mediterranean world. Neither of them ever heard of the Mongolian steppe. Genghis Khan never read a single word either of them wrote. And yet the decision-making framework Genghis Khan built from scratch maps onto Stoic philosophy with a precision that is not coincidental and not metaphorical. It is structural, it is documented. 2 men, no connection, no shared language, centuries apart. Same operating system. That is not coincidence. That is what universal law looks like when it runs through enough history. Let's go back to the steppe, because that is where the operating system was built. Chapter 2. The origin code, the Mongolian steppe, is not a place. It is a curriculum. And it teaches through the only method that produces real change in how a man thinks. Immediate, unforgiving consequence. You make the wrong decision on the steppe. You do not get time to reflect on it. You die. Or someone you depend on dies. The feedback loop is brutal and completely honest. And that kind of environment produces something that comfortable conditions almost never produce. It produces clarity. Genghis Khan spent his first 20 years inside that system. Abandoned, enslaved, betrayed by blood. He lost everything multiple times before he had accumulated anything worth losing. And each time, the response was identical. Not rage, not collapse, but extraction. Pull the lesson out, discard the emotional residue, move forward with better information. 3 specific lessons the steppe drove into him form the foundation of everything he built afterward. The first, scarcity is a filter, not a sentence. Every resource on the steppe was limited and contested. The men who survived were not the strongest. They were the ones who made better decisions with less than everyone else. Epictetus, born into slavery with 0 resources and 0 freedom, arrived at the same conclusion in Discourses, Book 1, Chapter 1, that external deprivation cannot touch the internal capacity for clear thinking. What you do not have cannot stop you. The second, loyalty is a system, not a feeling. Tribal loyalty on the steppe was built on bloodline, and Genghis Khan watched it fail repeatedly. Blood relatives betrayed each other the moment pressure became high enough. So he built something different, a loyalty architecture based entirely on demonstrated merit. He promoted slaves. He adopted enemies who had shown courage in battle. Marcus Aurelius addressed this directly in Meditations, Book 6, that genuine capability and genuine commitment produce more than 10 men who serve out of obligation or fear. The third, defeat is data, not identity. He was captured, enslaved, and betrayed multiple times before the age of 20. His response every single time was the same: extract the information the failure contains, discard the emotion attached to it, continue forward with a more refined strategy. The Stoics called this amor fati. Marcus Aurelius wrote in Meditations, Book 4, Paragraph 3, that you have power over your mind, not outside events, and that this single realization is where all strength begins. Genghis Khan did not need to read that line. He had already proven it. And once that quality of mind was formed, the next question is the one that actually built the empire. How exactly did it make decisions? Because those decisions follow 5 rules, so consistent and so precisely documented that they read like a Stoic manual written on horseback. Chapter 3. The Decision Architecture. Every man who built something that lasted operated by a set of internal rules. Not the ones he announced publicly. The actual rules, running quietly underneath every decision, every appointment, every response to crisis. The ones that only become visible when you study the pattern of choices across decades, rather than the drama of individual moments. Genghis Khan left no philosophical treatise, but the secret history of the Mongols and the administrative record of his empire reveal a decision-making architecture so consistent across 40 years that it cannot be accidental. 5 rules, documented, precise, each one carrying a Stoic parallel written centuries before he was born. The first rule: never make a strategic decision based on what you cannot control. He built every battle plan around speed, intelligence, supply lines, and unit cohesion, variables inside his circle of influence, and was genuinely indifferent to everything outside it. Epictetus opened the Enchiridion with exactly this framework. The man who spends his force on what he cannot move is not strategic. He is simply exhausted. The second rule: control your response, and you control the outcome. When his blood brother Jamuka betrayed him, the emotional logic demanded immediate retaliation. Instead, Genghis Khan went quiet, rebuilt, and spent 7 years repositioning strategically until the response could be decisive rather than merely satisfying. Marcus Aurelius wrote in Meditations, Book 4, that what stands in the way becomes the way, not as passive acceptance, but as the deliberate conversion of obstacle into strategic advantage. The third rule: build systems that outlive your decisions. The Yasa, his legal and administrative code, was not designed for his lifetime. It was designed for a century after his death. Seneca wrote in Letters to Lucilius, Letter 77, about the difference between a man who works for the day and a man who works for what the day is building toward. The Yasa is a Senecan document in structure, a deliberate investment in a future the investor would not personally collect. The fourth rule: promote capability, never loyalty to a name. His 2 greatest generals, Subutai and Gebe, were not born into his tribe. Gebe had fired an arrow through his horse in battle. Genghis Khan tracked him down afterward and gave him a command. The quality of the man was the only criterion that mattered. Marcus Aurelius called this virtues in Meditations, Book 6, demonstrated excellence in function as the only true qualification for any position of consequence. The fifth rule: information is a strategic asset above every other resource. The Yam Relay Network was the fastest information infrastructure on Earth for 2 centuries. He consistently knew an enemy's position before that enemy knew he was moving. Marcus Aurelius described the discipline of perception in Meditations, Book 6, Paragraph 13, seeing clearly, without distortion, as the foundation of every correct action. The man who acts on distorted information is not making decisions. He is making guesses. 5 rules, built alone, without a single philosophy book available, and mapped with structural precision onto the framework the Stoics were developing on the other side of the known world at exactly the same time. But what those 5 rules actually built, that is the part almost nobody tells, because it does not fit the narrative of the conqueror. It fits the narrative of something else entirely. Chapter 4. The Wealth Mechanism. When most people think about the wealth generated by the Mongol Empire, they think about plunder, gold stripped from conquered cities, treasure taken by force. That image is not entirely wrong, but it is so incomplete that accepting it as the full picture means missing the most financially sophisticated achievement of the medieval world. Genghis Khan did not build the largest empire in history by accumulating what already existed. He built it by creating the conditions for wealth to generate itself, continuously, across 3 continents, long after any single battle was over. At its peak, the Mongol Empire connected China, Central Asia, Persia, Russia, and Eastern Europe under a single administrative and legal framework. For the first time in history, a merchant could travel from the Pacific coast to the Mediterranean without crossing a hostile border, without paying a different toll at every city gate. The Silk Road became a functioning transcontinental trade infrastructure. Historians call this the Pax Mongolica, and it was, in purely financial terms, the largest free trade zone the world had ever seen. The wealth moving through that system was not plunder. It was commerce. Voluntary exchange, at scale, across a network built not by accumulating gold, but by accumulating access. Seneca wrote in Letters to Lucilius, Letter 2, about the man who identifies the single mechanism that produces value and commits to it completely, versus the man who chases every individual opportunity and masters none. Genghis Khan did not own the goods moving through the Silk Road. He owned the infrastructure that made the movement possible. He built the platform, not the product, and the platform compounded. The second wealth principle embedded in what he built: diversify through inclusion, not conquest. Persian administrators, Chinese engineers, Islamic astronomers. Instead of destroying the capabilities of every civilization he encountered, which was standard military logic, he absorbed the talent, integrated the knowledge, and built an intellectual capital base deliberately diversified across every culture inside his borders. Seneca described a Stoic cosmopolitan in exactly these terms: the wise man who draws genuine value from every source without being bound to any single one. The third principle is the one most directly relevant to this channel. The long game always defeats the fast win. Every major campaign was planned on a 5 to 10 year horizon. Immediate plunder was secondary to structural control. He accepted short-term losses when the long-term position justified the cost. Warren Buffett has said across decades of interviews that the single most important variable in wealth building is time combined with correct positioning, not frequency of moves, not short-term optimization. Compounding rewards patience. Genghis Khan was running that principle 8 centuries before the financial language to describe it existed. 3 principles: access over accumulation, diversified capability over homogeneous power, long horizon sequencing over short-term optimization. Applied to a portfolio, a career, or a business today, they produce the same category of result they produced on the steppe in the 12th century. But here is where this story gets genuinely uncomfortable. Because if these principles are this powerful, the next question is one this video cannot avoid. And it is the question most people either dismiss too quickly or refuse to ask at all. Chapter 5. The Paradox. Here is the most uncomfortable question in this entire video. And I am going to ask it directly, because avoiding it would be intellectually dishonest. And intellectual honesty is the only standard this channel operates by. The Stoics believed that virtue and the capacity to build something lasting were not separate things. They were the same thing. Seneca wrote in Letters to Lucilius, letter 87, that nothing acquired through the suffering of others can be called wealth in any meaningful sense, because the foundation it rests on is not stable. It is fear, and fear is the least durable building material that exists. Genghis Khan built the largest empire in human history, and he built it through methods that produced catastrophic human cost. The destruction of Merv, the siege of Baghdad, the campaigns across Central Asia that depopulated entire regions for generations. These are documented, and they sit in direct, unresolvable tension with the Stoic framework this video has been mapping his decision-making onto. So the question is real. Does the catastrophic cost of his methods invalidate the framework? 3 perspectives. No cheap resolution. The historian's perspective. The violence was not indiscriminate. Cities that surrendered without resistance were absorbed intact, their populations protected, their administrators kept in place. Cities that resisted were destroyed as a signal to the next city. The brutality was a calculated policy decision, not a character expression. That does not make it moral, but it means it was a strategic instrument, which is precisely what makes it worth examining rather than simply condemning. The philosopher's perspective. The Stoics were explicit that their framework was not a guarantee of moral outcomes. It was a description of how reality operates. A man can use the dichotomy of control, the discipline of perception, and long-horizon thinking to build something through methods that violate every moral standard the Stoics held, and the principles will still function. Gravity does not stop working for a man who uses it to cause harm. Neither does compounding. The principles are neutral. The character of the man using them is not. The investor's perspective, and this is the one most directly relevant to why you are watching this channel. Every principle this video has identified in Genghis Khan's decision-making is available to you right now, today, applied to your money, your career, and your decisions. Without the cost, without the violence, without the catastrophic human price he paid and imposed on others to learn and apply them. The principles do not belong to the methods used to discover them. They belong to anyone who understands them clearly enough to apply them correctly. Marcus Aurelius argued throughout the Meditations that the man who applies this framework with genuine virtue will build something, that the man who applies it without virtue can never sustain. And the most powerful evidence for that argument is not philosophical, it is historical. Because the empire Genghis Khan built lasted exactly as long as his successors continued to apply the principles. The moment they stopped, what happened next is one of the most instructive collapse sequences in recorded history. Chapter 6, The Collapse Lesson. Genghis Khan died in 1227. The empire did not collapse immediately. The systems he designed were robust enough to outlive him by decades. The Yasa held. The Yam network held. The merit-based command structure held. And then, gradually, and then suddenly, it did not. The fracture did not come from outside. No external enemy broke the Mongol Empire. No rival civilization developed a superior military capability. The empire fractured from the inside, at precisely the points where his successors abandoned the principles he had built it on. Not all at once. One decision at a time. One appointment based on the wrong criterion at a time. The first collapse point, the corruption of the merit system. Genghis Khan's successors began appointing commanders based on bloodline and personal loyalty, rather than demonstrated capability. The structural principle was broken. The signal sent to every capable man inside the empire was that the criterion for advancement had changed, that proximity to power mattered more than quality of performance. The best people began directing their effort elsewhere. Organizational quality degraded slowly, then faster, then irreversibly. Marcus Aurelius wrote in Meditations, Book 6, that the moment an institution begins selecting for appearance over substance, it has already begun its decline, because the selection mechanism that produced its strength has been replaced by one that produces its opposite. The second collapse point, the abandonment of long-horizon financial thinking. Kublai Khan introduced fiat paper currency across the Chinese portion of the empire and expanded it aggressively without the commodity backing required to sustain it. The short-term effect was administrative flexibility. The medium-term effect was inflation that destroyed the purchasing power of merchants across the entire Eastern trade network. The long-term effect was the erosion of the Pax Mongolica's commercial credibility, the single most valuable asset the empire possessed. Seneca wrote in Letters to Lucilius, Letter 94, about the corruption of value, the process by which an institution mistakes the symbol of wealth for the substance of it, and destroys the mechanism that produced the substance in the first place. The third collapse point, the fracturing of the Yasa. As the empire divided into 4 khanates, each successor began modifying the legal code to reflect local political pressures and personal preferences. The universal framework that had made the Pax Mongolica possible began to mean different things in different places. And when a framework means different things in different places, it no longer functions as a framework. Epictetus wrote in Discourses, Book 1, Chapter 2, that the principle bent once under pressure is not a principle. It is a preference. And preferences dissolve the moment the circumstances that supported them change. 3 collapse points. 3 direct Stoic warnings, all ignored within 2 generations. The empire did not collapse because it was attacked. It collapsed because the men who inherited stopped thinking the way the man who built it thought. They kept the vocabulary, the titles, the ceremonies, the name, and abandoned the operating system underneath it. And a structure running on inherited vocabulary without the original operating system is not in decline. It has already ended. It just has not finished falling yet. That pattern, maintained appearance, abandoned principle, is the most dangerous moment in the life of any structure you are building right now. Which makes the next question the most important one this video asks. Chapter 7, The Stoic Verdict. We started this video with a question, not a rhetorical one. A real one, planted in the first 5 minutes and left open deliberately, because the answer it deserves cannot be given until everything that precedes it has been established. What does it mean that 2 men, no shared language, no shared culture, no contact, separated by centuries and continents, arrived at the same operating system for building something that compounds beyond a single lifetime? The answer is now available, and it is not complicated, but it is significant enough to say clearly without softening it. These are not cultural products. They are not the philosophical preferences of a specific civilization at a specific moment in history. They are not opinions that happen to work for a particular man in a particular set of circumstances. What Genghis Khan built on the Mongolian steppe, and what Marcus Aurelius documented in a military tent at the edge of the Danube, and what Epictetus described from a position of zero institutional power in Greece, these are 3 independent derivations of the same underlying structure. The same way that 3 mathematicians working independently on 3 different continents will derive the same geometric proof, because geometry does not belong to any of them. It belongs to the structure of reality itself. The Stoics were the first civilization to document this structure clearly enough, consistently enough, and completely enough that it could be taught. That is their specific contribution, not the discovery. Genghis Khan proves they did not discover it alone. The documentation, the translation of a set of operating principles that reality runs on into a language precise enough that a man born 2,000 years later can read it and immediately recognize it as a description of how the world actually works. Marcus Aurelius wrote in Meditations, Book 9, Paragraph 9, that the same reason runs through everything, and that the man who aligns himself with that reason is not following a human invention. He is following the structure of things as they are. That is not mysticism. That is a precise description of what this video has been documenting across 8 centuries of history, 2 continents, and 2 men who never met and arrived at the same conclusions. Genghis Khan proved the Stoic framework without knowing it existed. And that proof, documented in military records, administrative codes, and the historical trajectory of the largest empire ever built, is more durable evidence for the validity of these principles than any philosophical argument could produce. Because a philosophical argument can be disputed. An empire that ran for a century on 5 specific decision-making rules and collapsed precisely when those rules were abandoned is not an argument. It is a result. The Stoics named the principles. Genghis Khan ran the experiment. The data is in. And now the only question that actually matters, the one that converts everything this video has covered from interesting history into something that changes your next decision, is this: what do you do with it? Chapter 8. The personal application. Everything this video has covered points toward a single practical question. Not what did Genghis Khan do? Not what did Marcus Aurelius write? But what do you do Monday morning with the specific circumstances of your actual life? 3 applications. Precise. No motivational padding. The first is the separation audit. Take a piece of paper and write down every major decision you are currently avoiding. Every financial move you have been postponing. Every structural change you know needs to happen and has not happened. Then for each item on that list, identify precisely and honestly which elements are actually within your control and which are not. What you will discover, what Epictetus described in the Enchiridion, Chapter 1, and what Genghis Khan proved across 40 years of decision-making under pressure, is that most of the paralysis is generated by variables you cannot move. You are spending cognitive energy on the weather. The path forward only requires moving the variables you can actually move. Once you see the list that way, most of the decisions stop being difficult. They become obvious. The difficulty was never the decision. It was the failure to separate what belonged to you from what did not. The second is the loyalty architecture review. Map the 5 people who have the most influence over your financial and professional decisions right now. Not the 5 people you are closest to emotionally. The 5 whose judgment actually shapes the moves you make with your money and your career. Then ask one honest question about each. Is this person here because of demonstrated merit and proven judgment, or because of comfort, familiarity, and the accumulated weight of shared history? Genghis Khan answered that question structurally and built an empire. Most people never ask it at all. Your financial and professional trajectory is, to a degree most people significantly underestimate, a direct function of whose judgment you are operating on. The quality of your inner circle is not a social question. It is a compounding variable. And compounding variables, left unexamined, run in both directions. The third is the long game horizon shift. Take your most important current financial goal, the one generating the most pressure right now. Rewrite it on a 10-year horizon. Not as a fantasy, as a structural exercise. Ask what that goal looks like if the timeline is 10 years instead of 10 months. And identify the single most important decision, not 10 decisions, not a 12-step plan, the one decision that, executed correctly today, changes the trajectory of everything that follows. Marcus Aurelius wrote in Meditations, Book 2, paragraph 14, that the only rational response to the finite nature of time is to act on what matters most, now, without waiting for conditions that will never be perfect. The 10-year horizon is not permission to delay. It is the correct frame for identifying which action today produces the most compounding value over the time you actually have. 3 applications. 1 audit. 1 honest map of your inner circle. 1 reframe of your most important goal onto the horizon where compounding actually operates. The framework is available. The question is whether you use it. Chapter 9. The thread forward, the Mongol Empire at its peak, was not just the largest political structure in human history. It was the largest engine of commercial connection the medieval world had ever produced. The Pax Mongolica did not just move armies, it moved capital. It moved ideas. It moved financial instruments across 3 continents at a speed the world before Genghis Khan had no infrastructure to support. And the trade routes he opened did not close when the empire began to fracture. They kept running, because the merchants and bankers who had built their operations around those routes had no interest in closing them. The infrastructure outlived the empire that built it, as it always does when the infrastructure is built correctly. Those routes carried something westward that would eventually reach a city on the Arno River in northern Italy. Not silk, not spices, something more durable and more consequential than either. A set of financial ideas. Instruments for managing risk across long distances. Methods for pooling capital, distributing exposure, and compounding returns across multiple ventures simultaneously. The early architecture of what we now recognize as modern banking carried westward along the corridors that Genghis Khan's empire had opened and maintained. One family in Florence picked up those ideas, systematized them, and used them to run European finance for 200 years. They never read Genghis Khan. They never studied Stoic philosophy. But what they built maps onto these same principles with identical structural precision. That family is the next video in this playlist. And if what Genghis Khan built across an entire continent in the 12th century moved the needle for you, what the Medici built inside a single city across 2 centuries will move it further. The Stoics practiced memento mori every single day without exception. The deliberate, conscious remembrance that time is finite, that the hours available to you right now are not guaranteed to be available tomorrow, not as a source of anxiety, as a source of clarity, because the man who remembers that his time is limited stops spending it on things that do not compound. This video took 30 minutes of that time. If it gave you something worth keeping, a reframe, a tool, a question you had not asked yourself before, then it was not 30 minutes spent. It was 30 minutes invested. And invested time, like invested capital, produces returns that spent time never does. If someone in your life is building something, a career, a portfolio, a business, a future, and they are doing it without this framework, share this video with them. Not for the algorithm, because that is what the Stoics would have called the correct use of something valuable. You do not keep a useful tool to yourself when the people around you need it. Subscribe to the Stoic Compound. Hit the notification bell so the next video in this playlist reaches you the moment it goes live. The philosophy that built empires is available to you right now. The only question is whether you are going to use it. New videos every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday.